Today, I have with me in the podcast, Melanie Rieback. Welcome, Melanie.
Hi.
And you are the founder and CEO of Radically Open Security.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's your.
Yeah, it's a social enterprise in the security consultancy space, and I started it about 6.5 years ago.
And now, with how many people do you work now in the company?
Yeah, there's roughly 40 of us, and we've had, I would say, over 100 customers. We have done work for, Dutch Ministry of Health. Recently, we were in the news with our security audit work on the Corona Melder. We've also done some COVID contact tracing security audits for the European Commission, also on several other national apps, as well as for the Google Apple exposure notification API. So that's pretty cool. But we also have worked for, Google, Mozilla, banks, insurance companies, telcos, hosting providers, but also SMEs, cheaper work for startups, and we do a nonprofit work at cost price basis for nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society.
It's just amazing. How do you get to this in only 7 years?
In only 6.5 years?
Yeah.
We've put a lot of attention on quality and sort of doing the right things for the right reasons, openness and transparency. I also mentioned that we're a social enterprise. We actually are, furthermore, what we would call a not-for-profit company. So we actually give our profits to charity, which is kind of unique. So we've given over 250,000 euros to the NLNet Foundation. And for the rest, just it's been a really good, value proposition. A lot of folks like our values. It's just gone really well.
When you started your business, how did you came up with those values?
Yeah, so when I first started Radically Open Security, I was working in the cybercrime team at ING Bank, and we were working with several of the market leaders in the security consultancy space in the Netherlands, and we had some incidents, and some of those folks kind of parachuted in. They were like, okay, we're the experts, just stand back, we're going to fix everything for you and give you a large bill, and report at the end. And I was just like, all right, cool, but if you guys are so elite, I can probably learn a whole bunch from you. So, would you mind if I watch along with what you're doing? Because, it's my job to make the security of the bank better. They were not impressed by my desire to watch along with them. They told me, oh, but security is hard. And I'm just like, okay, well, I used to be an assistant professor of computer science specialized in computer security. So why don't you try me? And eventually the only way that I was actually able to see what they were doing was to physically stand next to them and look over their shoulder, because that was the only way they couldn't get rid of me. And sure enough, they were using exactly the same open source tools as everybody. But the thing was, they didn't actually want you knowing that because, they were trying to cultivate a dependence of the customers upon them. And well, to be fair, they were actually quite successful at doing this as well. I was not impressed. And it turns out a whole lot of other people also aren't. I'd asked around at the time with other banks, but also with, some government entities, like, do you like being treated like this? And universally, the answer was, well, no, we don't like it, but what's the alternative? Around the same time, also, there was a huge discussion in the hacker community about ethics with security companies. One of the market leaders in the Netherlands also was doing things like building surveillance systems that got sold to developing countries. And then when the hacker community asked them to stop, did they stop? No, they just sold that part of the company. So, so there was really this really big discussion that was happening in the Dutch hacker community. So I kind of put two and two together and said, okay, well, the ethical hackers aren't happy. and also the customers aren't happy. So, if you ask me, there's a hole in the market. So that's when I decided to leave ING Bank to start Radically Open Security. And ever since then, kind of the rest is history. But, I wanted to make Radically Open Security really different, but I didn't know how. So I went to Michiel Leenaars, who's a friend of mine from the NLNet Foundation. And I said to him, Michiel, I want to make a completely different kind of security company, but I just have no idea how to do that, because it's one thing to say you're different, but it's a whole nother thing to actually be different. And he said, well, Melanie, there's this really elegant construction from the Dutch church. So there's this thing called so occasionally a church wants to do a commercial spin-off, whether it's some brownie bake or something else, they want to raise some money, and they want that money to go with a tax benefit back to the church again. This is called a fiscal fundraising institution, in Dutch a fiscaal fondswervende instelling. Now, a famous example of this in the Netherlands is the Lange Institute Regina Caeli, otherwise known as the Nonnen van Vught, the Nuns of Vught. And it's a famous language institution that was started by these nuns. It's excellent quality. Our queen in the Netherlands, learned her Dutch at this language institute, and then all of the profits go back to the nuns. So that's the relationship of these things. So we kind of figured, well, we can make our so-called commercial spin-off a security consultancy company, and we can make our church the NLNet Foundation. So essentially, Michiel said, so, you want to give all your profits to us? And I was like, yeah, wow, fantastic idea. So, so once he'd suggested this, it didn't let go of me. And, the more I thought about the concept of building a not-for-profit company, it gripped me. And I just realized that this is just weird enough that I absolutely had to try it. So I went back to my other co-founders and told them, oh, and by the way, we're going to be giving our profits to the NLNet Foundation, at which point they were a little bit surprised, by that announcement. But once I explained it to them, it actually made perfect sense. So, and that's sort of been the cool thing, because what I've discovered from, running a company that gives all of its profits to charity is that when you decouple profit motive from business, then it really allows you to kind of re-envision a business itself as, kind of a vehicle for pure positive impact, and that's sort of how I've attempted, these last 6.5 years to run the company. So yeah, and it's just turned out that this whole formula has been really very attractive. Both for idealistic staff members, as well as for, like-minded customers. And that's part of what's been behind our growth.
Because the weird thing for me, looking at you, is this: you're an American. You were born in America, you were raised in America, you studied in America, mm-hmm. And the American economics model is a different than what you are just using now for your own business, because profit is everything. Building your own business, becoming mm-hmm. big, independent, growing it even bigger and bigger, billions and trillions. That's all important mm-hmm. In society, not just in America, but in the modern world. Why is it that you wanted? I know you said I wanted to do something different, but why is it you choose not to build a company for your own profit?
Well, first of all, you're right. I'm American. I'm an expat. I've lived in the Netherlands almost 20 years. So, given that I just turned 42, I'm basically almost half Dutch at this point. There's a reason why I'm not living in the States. It's all I can say. I love America. It's still home for me in many ways that, it will always be. I grew up in Florida, and, every time I go home, certainly there's people I miss. There's foods and, and restaurants and stores and, things. And, America's a wonderful, beautiful country. But that being said, what I'm not really enchanted with America for is, how do I say this? The Netherlands is a lot more social, and as much as, the United States is sort of a neoliberalistic, capitalistic, country, The Netherlands is more of a social capitalistic country, and I very much believe in more social forms of capitalism. You know, I mean, after living for 20 years in a place where I have things like socialized healthcare, you know, and where people can, you know, bring up families here and their kids can go to the university, not just for free, but they actually get paid, you know, for attending college. And, you know, amazing public transportation, you know, really well maintained, you know, roads and public spaces. And I mean, of course, not everything is perfect here. I mean, as every place has, you know, its advantages and disadvantages. But truthfully, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I can't think of any place where I would rather be, you know, in starting a business even, because the thing is, socialism in a way is good for entrepreneurship. And not a lot of people would say this, but, you know, entrepreneurs face a certain amount of risk. Now, let's say that I, you know, catch COVID-19 and then I become one of these people who's affected a very long time from this disease. And let's say that, hypothetically speaking, this would prevent me from working. You know, as an entrepreneur, you know, if I were in the States and I were to have this happen to me, I mean, first of all, I would probably, you know, I would probably go bankrupt because, I mean, as soon as you get sick, I mean, of course, the actual costs of healthcare, even if you have insurance, you know, because I've had a number of people who were insured but got slapped with just abnormal and ridiculous, you know, medical fees. You know, and on top of that, I mean, there's no social safety net really. I mean, it's just scary. Whereas, you know, if I take the entrepreneurial risk here in the Netherlands and something goes wrong, then, you know, I know that my healthcare is covered, you know, and I know that, you know, there's, you know, there's basically an entire welfare system, you know, that can continue to support me. And it just, as an entrepreneur, that is far less scary. So, you know, I mean, as much as there are some advantages, you know, in Silicon Valley and New York City and some of the more, you know, the larger cities in the States, I mean, I think also here in Amsterdam, where I live, we've also got a really amazing, you know, entrepreneurship ecosystem. We've got a really great tech community. We've got a really amazing, but we've also got, you know, art and culture. We've got, I mean, you know, in a way, Amsterdam is sort of like the San Francisco of Europe. So, I mean, there's so many different things, you know, to love about it here, you know, plus all the ways in which our country is doing it right, just quite simply because we're not wasting a whole bunch of money on things like, I don't know, defense and really huge armies. So anyway.
The question I'm having, because you talk about socialism and you see that some companies have these, larger companies in the world have these postbox companies in the Netherlands, right? So to avoid paying taxes somewhere else. So how does the tax work in the structure that you've chosen?
Yeah, so I know that the Netherlands is a tax paradise. I'm not entirely sure how it works because honestly, I've never investigated that. Although I'm actually really quite curious because I know that you have the Virgin Islands and then you know, Curacao and all these other places. But yeah, I mean, my only experience in the Netherlands is that taxes have been expensive. You know, and also as a social entrepreneur, the other thing is I'm happy to pay them. I mean, just quite frankly, because, you know, this whole social safety net that I told you about, I mean, you know, I'm perfectly happy to contribute to that, you know, because with the certainty that that gives me, I'm also happy to put in my fair share, you know, and I'm a, you know, I have a permanent employment contract with my own company, you know, not surprising. And, you know, with what I'm earning, I'm probably giving what, like 60% of my salary in taxes. And I'm happy with that. You know, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have it be any other way because, you know, I know that that money is getting spent in the best possible ways, you know, in providing for everybody. So, I mean, that's sort of my, you know, opinion about about taxes and companies. I mean, we should try to not get out of them because, you know, any company that's avoiding paying taxes is really shirking its social duties, you know. And the way that, you know, certain companies do manipulate local governments, you know, threaten also governments that, you know, either we have to get these tax breaks or we're going to move out of your city. I mean, it's completely unethical, and immoral. And I'm in that sense, I am a bit of a socialist. So my apologies for whoever it might happen to be offending. But I'm also a fan of Bernie Sanders and Warren Buffett, or sorry, not and Elizabeth Warren and various people who are very much in favor of taxation. Also Bill Gates. I mean, if you talk to some of these entrepreneurs, they're like, yes, tax me, please. It's sort of, it's sort of one of the ways that I think that the United States went wrong. We used to have a much better sorted out social system, and of course that got disassembled, I think, from Ronald Reagan onwards. So anyway, I guess enough political ranting, but anyway, as for the fiscal fundraising institution thing, the irony of the FFI though is actually that it is a fiscal construction. So actually, it is a sort of a special tax designation that you can use to get tax breaks on corporate tax. And it was really funny because I told about the FFI one time at an accountancy conference, and they were like, we really love your ideas, but why did you choose a business model that's best known for tax evasion? So, so basically, I mean, all I can say is that I'm actually trying to figure out also ways to create sort of what I'm calling now these nonprofit companies, but also post-growth companies that doesn't involve an FFI, because I honestly don't think that tax breaks or any tax construction at all should be at the heart of being a purely social business. So I'm trying to find ways. I've been working with a lawyer named Sophie van Londen, who has been trying to put together contracts to ensure that we can not extract any money, from our company, or if any money is extracted, that it goes to charity in the same we're doing now, but without the tax break, just quite simply because I also don't think that the tax authorities should have the authority to be able to say, yes, you're, a post-growth company, or no, you're not a post-growth company, because quite frankly, it's none of their business. So, in that sense, I sort of see what I did with the FFI as being sort of a stepping stone, on the path towards where I want to go, but I don't necessarily see it as being the end point.
So maybe you want to change the legal construction later on?
Well, we're already with nonprofit ventures experimenting with these new contracts.
Right.
So, and we're basically looking for different legal constructions. We're still basically using a combination of a, what we call in Dutch, a stichting and a BV. So basically sort of like half foundation, half company. And the foundation owns all of the shares of the company. And basically, you can put some restrictions into companies using the statutes and also putting your mission in there, because that's one place where you can actually enforce it. You can also use shareholder agreements, ironically enough, to say that you shouldn't have any shareholders. And you can embed some sort of weirder restrictions into shareholder agreements than you can in the statutes, because if statutes get too weird, then they're no longer legally defensible. And the final thing is also the use of advisory boards. So basically, what we would call a raad van bestuur or raad van toezicht in the Netherlands, which is basically just, boards, both on the foundation as well as on the, the company. Also ensuring that these boards can vote to overrule the director if anybody decides to try to do anything stupid like sell the company. So in that sense, we're doing a bit of, legal hacking, a little bit similar to how steward ownership is also doing it with trying to prevent companies by being sold with their usage of the golden share. And also stealing some ideas from other places, like with B Corporation, also with using your statutes to bake in certain things. But as opposed to some of these other constructions, we're really trying to create non-extractive companies. So not so much low profit corporate entities, but literally like, no profit corporate entities when profit is defined as extraction. So.
I'm thinking about this last part. So profit is defined as extent. Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, profit has this double meaning that most people don't realize. So there's two meanings to the word profit. One meaning is what I would call margin on turnover. So if you have a business, you presumably are selling something, otherwise you wouldn't be a business. So I sell an item to you, and then I sell it, let's say I have a banana, I sell that banana, I bought it for 50 cents and I sell it to you for 75 cents, then that, the turnover at that point is basically 75 cents. And then the margin is the 25 cents. Now that profit, that margin on turnover is one definition of the word profit. And that's the part of the profit that you can reinvest back into your company for building a stable platform. So, that's one definition. The second definition of the word profit that's embedded in the word profit is extraction. And that's essentially the money that is dividended out, towards the shareholders, the founders. Essentially, it's that extraction that really creates the 99% and the 1%. So, but the problem is that these two meanings, margin on turnover and extraction, are embedded into the same word. So this makes, the concept of profit really difficult for us. So, if you say to people, or people will say sometimes, well, of course my company has to be profitable, otherwise it won't survive. At which point I'm like, okay, which meaning of the word profit are you talking about? If you're talking about margin on turnover, totally agree with you. If you're talking about extraction, not only do I disagree, but, it's really harmful. It's not just harmful to, people socially, but it's even harmful to the business itself, because no business itself is going to get better by having the financial value pulled out of it. It's actually a competitive disadvantage on the market. But the problem is, this is the system. We like to complain about the system, but this, just in our semantics, this ideology that's embedded is the system, and most of us don't even realize it. So until we can actually talk about profit, understanding the difference between these two meanings, then, how can we actually understand how to build better businesses? It's the same thing with anything not for profit, because of this double meaning, it also, makes it unclear as well. Because if you have things like NGOs, those are very clearly not for profit, non-extractive. But at the same time, they also assume, because of this double meaning, that being not for profit also means that they're not allowed to have margin on turnover, which of course is completely absurd because, NGOs need to start having business models because, subsidies and donations are drying up. And the more dependent they are on these things, and the less that they have their own income streams that are independent, the less likely they are to survive to continue doing their activism. So this is really the point.
I love how you explain this because it wasn't clear enough to me. I looked at your presentation, the TED Talk in Berlin, and I also read the comments below that, and people are, a part of the people are not very optimistic about this model. And I think that it's partly because of this misunderstanding of the word profit, like you just described. And I also like what you just described of NGOs, because I always, when I talk about this topic now, I talk about more recently, I get the same feedback, right? If we go for this, we can't make a profit. Well, that's not true. You just don't, like you said, don't extract the profit. Like the Rabobank has made, a great bank, and they were using this model. So why couldn't it work for your company? You talked about these the companies that you're working with to finding out the structure for you, and that is your company nonprofit venture you started in 2000, the incubator, right?
Yeah, so the incubator nonprofit venture started about 2.5 years ago. So we've been, ever since we made a success out of our business model with radically open security. Now, I've been saying since like day one that I wanted to try generalizing the business model and, helping other people to also use it in other areas besides cybersecurity. So that's really what nonprofit ventures has been about. It's been about trying to actually crystallize out what we did, like in practical entrepreneurial terms, and also really putting together a methodology that enables other people to also be able to do it themselves, also, in other areas. So, that's led to a number of different initiatives. We've hosted workshops and events and trainings, and, we also created a post-growth entrepreneurship class that was piloted at the Free University of Amsterdam that had roughly, probably about 40 participants, got really good reviews. Post-growth entrepreneurship is now worth 6 ECTS points as an internship at the Free University of Amsterdam in their business school. And we've also been working together with the University of Amsterdam. Those two business schools work together, the FU and the University of Amsterdam. And we're trying to create an online version of the same class, a MOOC that hopefully we can put up on Coursera, which is also, can make this post-growth entrepreneurship class available to everybody. And we put out a pilot video roughly 6 months ago. We're continuing working on the actual content for making recordings. I've got about 300 pages of, of text, basically written down now. That's all going into this stuff. And, I've basically been spending a lot of time recently trying to get radically open security out of the middle of it, just, to try and make sure that we can keep it with sort of more big generic principles that everyone can use. So it's really been a lot of work, but but it's a work in progress. And, we also created a startup boot camp for post-growth entrepreneurship that we launched in Terschelling, a little Dutch island in the Netherlands, back in March, which had 13 participants and 5 organizers. And we were basically, helping to incubate brand new startups that were working with this business model. There were a few startups that spun off out of that week. We're actually really running, like post-growth startups now, which is amazing. And we're actually any day going to be online in the written form for upcoming 10-week incubation program that we're going to be piloting, this time online because of COVID-19. And this should be, I think, really fantastic. So we've got all of these activities that are going on. So, and this all sort of falls under the umbrella of what we're doing with nonprofit ventures.
And to me, it sounds a lot like a similar ideology you have with your own business. It kind of like you treat it like an open source. You experiment with this idea, you build up your own business, then you have these incubators and you teach people so that you, instead of just, okay, this is my knowledge and I protect it, it's just me, I will sell the courses. No, you are really sharing it so that everybody can use this and work for it their own. I just love that idea. I just had to say that.
Yeah. Well, price is a barrier to entry of the adoption of whatever it is that you're creating. So, I see no reason to put artificial barriers to entry on what I'm creating. And that's the thing. I'm trying to come up with business models that can support all of this. For the pilot courses and all the work that I'm doing, at the universities, that's all for free. I'm not getting paid anything, for any of this that I'm doing. Similarly, also with, the startup bootcamp, we actually made it with a business model so that the participants were able to participate for free. And we had one company that bought a corporate seat that basically mostly covered the cost of the event. Basically enabling the majority of people to participate free, but then having one company use it as a corporate training, which basically, supports, the event and keeps it financially viable. I'm really aiming to do that. I'm working right now on a manuscript that I'm hoping eventually, to turn into a book. And, all of this stuff I want to be released for free. I want to be Creative Commons, in the same way that, some people with big ideas, look at Charles Eisenstein, and the amazing work he's done, also with, he puts out all of his books, very much, with a gift economy mindset, and that, anyone can download the materials for free. They're welcome to make a donation if they like, but by and large, he's just trying to make sure that nobody has any kind of barrier, from reading his stuff. Same thing also with Frederic Laloux and reinventing organizations. He also makes his books available on a donation basis. For me, I don't even necessarily need a donation. I mean, honestly, my security company is covering the costs of all of this stuff. And, nonprofit ventures and radically open security are sort of in a beneficial symbiotic relationship with each other. The work that I'm doing with giving all of this stuff away for free with nonprofit ventures, this, is bringing a lot of attention to what I'm doing and to myself, and also to radically open security. For example, we recently got on a Dutch documentary program called Tegenlicht, Backlight, because of basically they came to film at this post-growth startup bootcamp that we did in Terschelling. I don't know how many people watch Tegenlicht, but it's a whole lot of people, because after it aired, I got all kinds of, comments and contacts from different people. Some of those contacts were people saying, "Oh, you have a security company. That's fantastic. We would like to buy, a penetration test from you or some other security service." So truthfully speaking, by giving it away for free, we're really getting a maximum reach. In a way, it's sort of almost kind of like marketing. I mean, I don't look at it that cynically, but I mean, it really actually is really awesome business development. And given that we sell security services, things like penetration tests, one pen test typically costs between 6,000 to 12,000 euros. I don't have to sell that many pen tests, to make up for the costs of, all the time and effort that I'm putting into, the post-growth entrepreneurship stuff. So in essence, it's sort of a weird kind of marketing, but at the same time, it's also completely related to what I'm doing, and it's just totally symbiotic. So it's kind of using my activism, to support my company, but then also using my company to pay for the activism. So, yeah.
There's two things. I have a question, but I also like to say that what I like about this, because you talk about activism, and you also in the TED Talk you talk about art and more things that you can do with your business. I like that because you see too many companies, they have a basis of subsidies to fund these ideas instead of having a valuable, a good business model behind it. And that's what I like about your setup is I have a business model behind it, and they support each other. They actually improve each other's value. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
The question that I'm having is, how do you, with all this going on, divide your time in in all these jobs?
Yeah. I think that, radically open security is my job, and post-growth entrepreneurship and NPV is my, nonprofit ventures is my hobby. So, I definitely do put more time into radically open security just because it's paying my bills. That being said, I really, really enjoy what I'm doing with post-growth entrepreneurship. So, I do put a whole lot of time into it. And, I do take some time off for myself, evenings and weekends and like that. But occasionally, yeah. The other thing also is that ever since the pandemic and the lockdown, I'm able to also do a lot more things a lot more efficiently. Of course, I do miss travel, as many of us do. But at the same time, not having to physically go somewhere is, super efficient. So, a lot of times now, I can have, sort of, three meetings, just on, Zoom or whatever. And then I can, have a podcast recording with you, which lasts, an hour and a half. And then after that, then I can go, do something else. And that's really fantastic because, it used to be that I kind of always had to leave the house and, there was sort of travel time and commute time, or I went to a conference. I gave a talk at a Swiss event last week, from my living room, which, okay, it's not the same. And granted, it's decimated the hallway track, which I do miss sometimes. But, on the flip side of that, I am able to sort of squeeze so many things in nowadays. Plus, like added benefits of like you getting to see my cat.
Yeah.
Hello, cat. So, and it's so we make do of what we can,
I like the idea about the difference between like the traditional startup setup, like you divided it in three parts: capital, exponential growth, and exit.
Mm-hmm.
And how you don't like the situation, but also agree that it's not a good way to sustain as society, as the world, as everything that we do. It's just like you said, an organism is also at some point it's growing really hard, but then it flattens off, and it's not meant to grow forever. A tree doesn't grow into the sky forever. It just, like you said, in the species, it sprouts of new trees. So, but isn't it scary for these people? Don't you meet people that are just very skeptical about like a flat economic growth idea?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the majority of the people in the world are skeptical, but that's fine. I mean, I don't need to convince everybody, and I don't need to win everybody over. I mostly preach to my own choir, because at the end of the day, if we want to make things happen, it always needs to start with the so-called coalition of the willing. I mean, we need to start out with the folks that already agree with us and with the folks that believe in what we're saying, because, it requires a small number of people to serve as examples, and a small number of people to serve as role models, and that's the thing. And with nonprofit ventures and with some of the events that we're putting on and the kinds of people who participate, in our startup bootcamp, for example, I mean, they are already oftentimes very social minded. They're already social entrepreneurs, or they're working for NGOs, or, they're just sort of hippie types who, are sick of the corporate life and who think there's something different. There's a lot of people out there that are like that. And it only takes, a handful of these people, to start companies that become equally successful to radically open security. One company is an anomaly, I mean, 3 or 4 companies starts getting curious, 10 companies there's definitely something going on, 100 companies and you've basically got a movement, I mean, of the size that it's going to start getting taught, also in more conservative places. So that's the thing, and the other thing also is that we are entrepreneurs. So we are creating the employment opportunities for other people. So, as radically open security, I can be idealistic and then I create employment opportunity for currently, 40 other people. So it doesn't necessarily require all of those 40 other people to be as idealistic as me. I mean, probably, all of them are. Some of them just want to hack stuff and get paid for it. That's fine too. But I mean, of course, they're all very happy with our business model and they're very proud of our business model. And it's the kind of thing that I think it makes hiring a lot easier, because if they can do a certain kind of work at a certain billable rate, and they have the choice between doing the same work for the same price, here or do it or at some more commercial corporation. I mean, the choice is really easily made, because the majority of people actually want to do good, and if you offer them an opportunity to be able to do the right things in the right ways without having to sacrifice too much, then, 9 times out of 10 people will go for that. Why wouldn't they, So that's the thing, it really only takes those of us who want to create that vehicle for everyone else. And that allows then everyone else to get on board. And ultimately, the only way we're going to win over the skeptics is by showing them what we can build. Because it's a difference between theory, like post-growth macroeconomic theory, versus actually building the companies, which are real, flesh and blood companies, with people and with revenue and with margin and with books that can be analyzed by data scientists, to try and figure out what we're doing. You can actually look at how we're balancing, donating to charity versus reinvestment, in building our company, all of these things, and analyzing to make sure there's no extraction, these kinds of things. This is what's going to win over the skeptics at the end of the day, because, and it's pure crossing the chasm thinking, you need to start with the early adopters who are the folks that basically are already in your camp. And then slowly as things grow, it's also, as we say in Dutch, één schaap over the dam, one sheep over the dam, once a few sheep start walking, then the rest of the herd are going to follow, and it's the same thing with radically open security. I mean, we work with tons of huge corporations now. They don't necessarily all work with us because of our business model. Rather, they work with us because we're good, and because we have really good staff that's very well able to hack things very effectively, plus the openness and the transparency, and when we're more or less the same price as the competition. So at this point we've had enough validation just as being good that even the laggards are starting to come along now, not because they care about our business model, but just because we can provide them with a really good service. And that's sort of how we have to think about it. I mean, just harness those who are willing and like-minded at the beginning to allow us to get that ball rolling. And once the ball is rolling, the rest of the world will notice and start to come along with us.
Mm-hmm. If you are a company and you're thinking this model, right? You already have a company, so not your startup. You already have a company, and you're thinking about this model. How do you find? Because you've worked together with the what's it called? NL. What's the partner?
NLnet.
So from the beginning. But what if you're starting now and you need to decide where do I do my funds to, my profits to?
I think that some companies can make that switch easier than others. I think that companies that already have things like shareholders, I think that they would have a really hard time adopting this model, just quite simply because their shareholders would all have to agree with this, and the chances of that happening are probably next to zero. I think for large companies that are already set up the way that they are, their best bet is to spin off a new company. If you spin off basically some of your business or some of your personnel or some of your IP into a brand new startup, then I think it's easy to make it kind of this vehicle for pure positive activism, or pure positive impact. But truthfully speaking, ethics is something that's hard to build into an inherently unethical company. A lot of companies sort of try. It's sort of like in security, we've got this principle that's called security by design. So secure by design, which basically means you can't, make something secure by applying security like a Band-Aid, to something that's inherently insecure after the fact. Rather, you need to build in this security by design. So rather, just at the core of whatever it is that you're architecting. It's the same thing with ethics. You can't slap ethics onto some large corporation like a corporate social responsibility Band-Aid and think the whole thing is ethical. It doesn't work that way either. So really, I mean, I think if you're trying to create purely social companies, you need to start with a brand new company. And you can use larger companies as a way of launching, newer, smaller companies. People can then ask the question, yeah, but aren't you cannibalizing yourself? By taking some of your old company and then spinning it off into a brand new entity. Well, sure. I mean, of course, you can see this as a form of self-cannibalization, but an enlightened leader might also recognize this as not just cannibalizing their company, but as transforming their company.
Is the B Corp a kind of like just mentioned, like slapping on ethics on an existing company?
So B Corp is usually trying to put the mission into their statutes. In other words, so they're basically trying to make sure that they can be held accountable for the entire triple bottom line. Also, B corporations are audited by the company B Lab that also ensure that this triple bottom line is being taken into account. I kind of have mixed feelings about B Corps, because on the one hand, I think that, a lot of people who start B Corps are doing it for the right reasons. I mean, there's certainly a lot of really great B Corps out there, like, Patagonia, that are really trying to set an amazing example. I mean, their CEO a while back had changed the mission statement of the entire company to basically change them from a clothing company that did things that were good, for the environment. He basically turned them into an environmental activistic organization that also happens to make clothing, and that sort of sent all of Patagonia into a complete and total tailspin, where they needed to start asking themselves, okay, but what does this mean if we're actually environmental activism first? And, should we even be selling clothing anymore? So it led to this soul searching. But I mean, Yvonne made that change, because he realized that the B Corp as a entity, well, not so much an entity, but as a, sorry, my cat's being funny here. So the B Corp basically doesn't really put enough belts and braces to prevent you from really being able to extract from a company if you want to. Of course, there's countless cases of B corporations being sold. The most famous example is Ben & Jerry's being sold to Unilever, but also here in the Netherlands, we've got countless numbers of countless examples of B Corps and social enterprises that are getting sold, whether it's like, Vegetarische Slager, that was a good social enterprise that got sold. I think it was also to Unilever. Yep. I think also Oatly was recently sold as well. So, and that's one thing with the B Corp. There's a lot of really good intentions, but I think that the entity form doesn't necessarily nail it down enough. So again, it makes it low extraction, but not no extraction. It's the same thing also with steward-owned companies. I think, I'm also, I'm in contact with the folks who started it. And I think, again, really awesome intentions. I think the work that they've been doing with trying to also come up with legal constructions to prevent you from selling the company, like, with the Purpose Foundation and the Golden Share. I think this is really awesome. There's a few areas, though, that I think, like with steward-owned companies, that could be improved. I mean, things like, as far as I understand, there's no limits on what a CEO is allowed to pay themselves, which, is a bit funny. And I've also heard cases of steward-owned companies that paid themselves so-called universal basic incomes after they left the company, which meant that they were perpetually draining the company of cash after they'd left, but they were the only person in the company who was offered this. So it wasn't like every single, employee was, entitled to this, but it was just the founders or the CEOs or the initial co-founding team. That kind of thing I just don't think is right. And I don't necessarily think that that's what the folks in the Purpose Foundation intended either. But the problem is every model, no matter how much we think about it, is going to have an attacker model, and I'm also saying this as a hacker, by the way. My entire security company, does nothing but break other people's things. And it's the same thing with legal documents and also, these various constructions, whether it's B Corp or, steward-owned, or even with post-growth entrepreneurship, with the legal contracts that I'm putting together right now. The first question that I need to ask myself is, how are people going to break this? How are people going to abuse this? Because they will, because there's this whole, washing going on, whether it's social washing, greenwashing, purpose washing, steward washing, without a doubt, pretty soon there's going to be post-growth washing as well. I know it for a fact, because, people will want to use this stuff for marketing purposes. And then they're going to ask, how can I, unnaturally profit off of this? And that's why, it really takes a lot of work, I think, to try and nail down these entity forms to really try and eliminate that extraction. So I think that the B Corp, in emphasizing the use of putting our mission into statutes, I think they're right on the money, but we need to take the parts of that B Corp that work, and we need to, put it towards something that is a little bit more locked down. Same thing with steward owned. I think also, Golden Share, Purpose Foundation, awesome. wonderful ideas, great intentions, but there's still some loopholes. We need to get rid of these loopholes. So, and also with post-growth entrepreneurship, we're trying it in different ways, like with having the boards rather than but I'm sure people are going to find ways to break this too. So I think that the only way that we can do this is to try and get folks, preferably groups of lawyers, to, literally try and shoot holes, in these contracts that we're producing. And really just, because, we really need to create this entire threat model. I mean, basically we have to perform a pen test on our own legal contracts because it's not until we can actually really isolate these ways in which these things can be unintentionally abused that we're going to actually also understand how to fix them. And this is going to be an iterative process, and no single person is going to get this correct. Not me either. And we just need to understand that, we need to take the strong bits from this one, remove the weak bits, from the other one, combine a few different things, and sort of hopefully at the end of the day, we'll be able to come up with something that works. Because I kind of think with all these different movements, it's like we're all looking at different parts of the same elephant, I mean, like we all want the same thing. And I think we're all working towards that same outcome, but it's just we're using different words for describing it and using slightly different details, in implementing it. But at the end of the day, I think, we all want the same thing. So it's good for all of these different groups and all these different movements to get together, so we can really have kind of a critical analysis of, okay, what works with this thing, but not as much with that, and what works with this other thing, but a little bit. And if we can all put our heads together, hopefully we can try and come up with a few other alternatives that can learn from what's already been done and try and, take some of the advantages while leaving some of the disadvantages.
Right. The growth entrepreneurship, just to make sure that we understand it, what does that mean, post-growth?
Yeah, so post-growth is a term that I stole from the post-growth economists. So there's an economist whose name is Tim Jackson, and he wrote a book called Prosperity Without Growth. And I think he can basically be considered, I think, the father of the post-growth movement. And basically what post-growth means is that we want to create economies, but also companies that are resilient in an economy that does not require perpetual growth. So it requires, I think, a little bit of explanation. I mean, in Kate Rayworth's TED Talk, I mean, she asks the question about, how things, cannot grow forever. And she also brings up the point that, part of the reason why our economy has to grow forever is because there is so much extraction happening from our economy that it needs to continue growing just to maintain a steady state. Another parable that I recently came across that I think is extremely illustrative of the heart of the problem is from an economist whose name is Bernard Lietaer. And the parable is called The 11th Round. So basically, there was a village in the outback, and there were folks who were, treating cattle and chickens and, all kinds of different, bartering different animals. And, it was a system that worked for them. They had, they supported each other as a community. And, if one person's barn burned down, then the others helped to rebuild it, and, and these kinds of things. So one day, this stranger came into town, and he had shiny shoes and a white hat. And he looked at all of them at the market, and he was like, "Oh, they're all walking around carrying chickens. This is so primitive." And they were like, "Oh yeah, well, if you think it's primitive, how would you do it any better?" And he said, "Well, why don't you bring me a cowhide? I'll be standing by this tree over here. Get me this cowhide, and I will show you a better way to do things." So they came back the next day, and from this cowhide, he had printed out coins, basically what he called rounds. And there were, let's say, 10 families. And then what he did is he gave each of these 10 families 10 coins. And he said, okay, so here, each of these coins is worth 1 chicken. So now you can take these coins to the market, and then rather than carrying the chickens around, you can just exchange these coins with one another, and that saves you a whole bunch of work. So much easier. So they take these coins and then they use them, and then sure enough, yes, in fact, it was much easier. So they go back to the man and they're like, wow, this is such an amazing innovation. What can we do to thank you? And he was like, well, what you could do for me, I'm going to come back in 1 year time. I want you, I gave you 10 rounds. I would like you to pay me back in 1 year's time, an 11th. And they were like, well, okay, but where do we get the 11th from? And he was like, you'll see. You'll see. So, this basically put the families into the following dilemma. Either there were basically three ways in which they could solve the situation. A, they would default when the stranger came back in a year later and just said, sorry, we don't have an 11th round, too bad. The second option is that they could basically cut out one of the 9 families, which meant that, 9 of the families would have 11 rounds, but then the last family would have basically only 1 round. Or the third option was just to breed more chickens. So they decided that that was the best solution. So they went to go breed more chickens. So, the stranger came back at the end of the year. And basically, because of all these extra chickens, they now were able to give him back this 11th round. And he was like, wow, this is really fantastic, So, I'm going to now give you back, some extra rounds so you can keep doing this. And, we'll come back a year later, and we can do the same thing again. So after a couple of years of this, what wound up happening was that, all of a sudden there were chickens everywhere, because they kept breeding these chickens, so they could keep being able to pay this stranger back. And pretty soon everyone was like, yeah, but, we don't want any more chickens. Like, we're sick of eating chicken and we've got these feather pillows already and we don't need any more of it. And, they're leaving chicken poop everywhere. And this is starting to cause real problems. So basically, what the effect of this was, was that first of all, the fact what the stranger was doing in the system is he was introducing extraction into the system. In other words, it's also basically interest-bearing debt. In other words, usury, as it's called in the Bible, which is actually quite funny because, if we talk, like in my TED talk, I was talking about business as a form of spirituality. It actually turns out that interest carrying debt is actually a sin in the majority of our major religions. So, if you look, like Islamic banks, for example, put really strict limits on the amount of interest that they're allowed to charge. Same thing with Jesus throwing the money lenders out of the temple, the money changers, because they were charging, again, interest basically on these transactions, and as they say in the Bible, the love of money is the root of all evil. So, this starts to sort of raise some questions also about what we're doing with the whole practice of using money to breed more money. Biblically speaking, this is like the worst thing that there is, which starts to, probably cause us to ask questions about some of our business models, whether we're talking about VCs or landlords or, or situations like that, where we most certainly, our entire economy is about using capital to breed more capital. But anyway, but the point is that extraction is the original sin of business.
Yeah. Wow. I think I should just close this episode now. It was such a good story. And the ending is so clear. Thank you, Melanie. It was great learning from you. It was great getting ideas of how we could do this, how I could do this, how people could do this with their company, and learn from you and follow you. Where is it people can learn more about this topic and about your business?
Yeah, so folks can learn more about my business, Radically Open Security, at radicallyopenSecurity.com. Folks can also learn a bit more about me. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So Melanie Rieback is my name, and just feel free to connect with me there. Nonprofit Ventures also has a LinkedIn group where we post announcements for upcoming events. So anyone who wants to participate in upcoming events can feel free to join that group and get looped in. Another thing also is that most of our materials that are currently publicly available are available at postgrowthentrepreneurship.com. So the TEDx video, but also we've got 6 hours of workshop videos that I had taught at the Free University. They're a little bit older now. I've got some new materials. I'm also busy working on this manuscript right now. It's still not ready for the big time, but folks that are interested, actually, if you contact me on LinkedIn, I am, right now it's the only written version that I have of a lot of these ideas, and I am willing to share it with people if they're willing to look through the cosmetic problems that it has at the moment, just given, the fact that it's a work in progress. I mean, eventually I'm going to release this with a Creative Commons license anyway, for free for everybody. But for those who don't mind looking at really ugly lists of nested bullet points, the majority of the points actually that I'm making and the things that I want to put into this methodology, I already have written down. So most of the information is there, and I'm willing to share that with folks who are interested.
Great, great. I'm going to put all these links, of course, in the show notes so people can just click on the link and just go to that. And of course, also connect with you on LinkedIn. Again, thank you very much, Melanie, and hope to talk to you in the future.
Okay, well, thank you so much.